Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Once this thing spun up, the Hurricane Center was on it.
Are we seeing a new breed of hurricanes?
Physically and mentally, it's taxing on us.
Funeral directors struggling under COVID's weight.
Ed Orgeron is a defendant in 2 different lawsuits.
How hot is it for LSU's Coach O?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kara St. Cyr.
And I'm Andre Morrow. Tonight, we begin our 45th season of SWI with a lot to get to. But first, it's hurricane and storm fatigue. It continues to overwhelm many of us, especially those hit hard and trying to clean up debris. 51,000 still don't have power, and some areas have not had garbage pickup.
For the past 18 days, that's been the case for the majority of New Orleans, a problem worsened by Hurricane Ida, which created a surplus of debris and trash. In a press conference yesterday, Mayor LaToya Cantrell said that the city hasn't had a workforce large enough for the job, but that emergency crews will be deployed today. The emergency crews will only dispose of bags and debris that don't fit into garbage bins, as they are the most pressing health hazards. Sanitation Director Matt Torrey said the City Hall will set up an online map for residents to track the progress of that effort.
We know that it was compacted due to Hurricane Ida, no doubt about that. The contractors are now are having to work in terms of the workload 3 to 5 times greater than what we saw pre-hurricane, and with a workforce of about 25%. There's absolutely no magic wand that's going to solve this overnight, and if it were one, I would have waved it already. But the one that I have been waving is that with my team to collectively provide a solution and find a solution to get the trash picked up, the solid waste picked up sooner rather than later.
Tropical Storm Nicholas, which was briefly a hurricane, did not make any of that easier on New Orleans or the state. The city experienced some flooding, as did many other areas of Louisiana. The storm dumping inches of rain in pocketed portions. What was left of Nicholas stalled over the state all week long, giving us on and off rain and flash floods. That impact is finally dissipating, though.
On the COVID front, LSU is now enforcing the vaccine mandate. In a tweet, Ernie Ballard, a spokesperson for the school, wrote that 78 students will be unenrolled for not following vaccine requirements. If students submitted a COVID test from the last 3 months or showed proof of vaccination by 4 p.m. today, they had the option to re-enroll. Ballard says some of the 78 students in that group showed interest in returning to class. Any who decided not to comply will receive a 50% refund from the university.
Last month, LSU President Dr. William Tate said students would have until September 10th to show proof that they started the vaccination process. They have until October 15th to show now that they are fully vaccinated. And now let's go to other news making headlines across the state.
The record will show Hurricane Ida is to blame for 2 more deaths in Louisiana. The health department says a 69-year-old man and 85-year-old woman, both from Metro Baton Rouge, died from excessive heat during the extended power outage caused by Ida. The total of souls now taken by the storm stands at 28. Among the many tragic stories in the aftermath of Ida are the deaths of 7 nursing home residents. They were evacuated to a warehouse in Tangipahoa Parish, where inspectors say conditions became unsafe once the storm struck. State AARP leaders say Ida showed that we continue to fail our most fragile citizens. Authorities captured and killed a 12-foot alligator believed to have attacked a Slidell man in floodwaters caused by Ida. Human remains were found in the gator's stomach. The The St. Tammany Parish coroner is working to identify them. The wife of 71-year-old Timothy Satterley says a gator attacked her husband in the high waters surrounding their home. Satterley has been missing ever since. Tulane's football team plans to play its first on-campus home game of the season September 25th against UAB. The Green Wave is 1-1, forced to play its first 2 games away from home. They lost a close one at then second-ranked Oklahoma, then crushed Morgan State in a game played in Birmingham. Tulane students will also return to campus that same week. Louisiana native Haley Arsenault is spending the rest of the week in space. She's part of the first all-civilian crew that blasted off Wednesday night and is spending 3 days in orbit without professional astronauts. Haley is one of LPB's 2003 Louisiana Young Heroes, and she's a cancer survivor who now works at St. Jude's Children's Hospital. It's a place where she spent much of her childhood. A big LPB happy birthday to 112-year-old Lawrence Brooks of New Orleans. Mr. Brooks is the oldest living veteran from World War II. Governor John Bell Edwards greeted Brooks at his home on his big day, while others drove by his house during a COVID-era celebration. Keep in mind, Mr. Brooks has now seen 2 pandemics in his lifetime. Born September 12, 1909, in the East Feliciana town of Norwood, Brooks has lived in New Orleans since 1929. After he served in the war as part of the 91st Engineer Battalion, he returned to the Crescent City and worked as a forklift operator. He retired when he was 70, 42 years ago.
Last year, Louisiana recorded 2,121 drug-related deaths. That's a 43% increase from 2019. The national average increased by only 29%. The Louisiana Department of Health links a lot of these deaths to the pandemic. And in honor of Recovery Awareness Month, we'll share a snippet of Adam Jablin's story. He's a recovering addict, spreading hope to those struggling with addiction.
You have to be primary, not secondary. You have to be fatal. You have to be chronic, and you have to be progressive. Right? So you progressively get worse. It chronically gets worse. Well, those 4 things, like cancer, alcoholism addiction does, and that's why the death rate is so high.
We'll have more of his story with you next week.
There's a new forecasting model to predict Gulf of Mexico hurricanes. It's just published by LSU researchers. Hurricane forecasts have used data from the Atlantic Basin historically, but researchers say the addition of the data from the Gulf will better predict how many storms that we might see. We've been ground zero for the worst storms the past 2 years.
The Hurricane Ida, it spun up in the Caribbean, relatively weak system.
Barry Keim is the state climatologist and also a professor at LSU, and he's our go-to expert to discuss weather and hurricanes. And we are talking to him more often, in this case, focusing on Hurricane Ida.
Once this thing spun up, the Hurricane Center was on it, and they forecasted this thing to hit Louisiana as a major hurricane, category 3 or 4. So I was shocked at how good that forecast was very early on, just as the storm was getting ginned up in the Caribbean. It crosses over western Cuba. In Cuba, the landmass tears the storm up. So it's a crippled storm entering the Gulf of Mexico, but the Gulf of Mexico was extraordinarily warm.
Extraordinarily warm and about to encounter the loop current in the Gulf.
This current takes on odd shapes and forms. Well, basically the shape of this current created a warm water superhighway for Ida to ride all the way to Louisiana. And it fed energy into the storm, and as a result, the Hurricane Center held steadfast with their forecast for this storm to gin up into a major hurricane. It even got stronger than they originally thought it would.
Much stronger, in spite of it taking longer to get to that even first point. And it was, when it intensified, it went from 85 to 150 overnight. So people who didn't pay attention, if they didn't, would have gone to bed and then woken up the next day and seen a super hurricane at the door.
Yeah, so if you were just looking at the actual data and the storm itself, you would have never guessed that was going to happen.
And what happened to places like Grand Isle, Homa, and many more, devastation. A Cat 4 hurricane similar to Hurricane Laura that walloped southwest Louisiana and Lake Charles a year ago. The storms that we're seeing of today, they seem to ramp up more quickly. The term rapid intensification, we're hearing more frequently, and there can be rainfall amounts that come down seemingly more excessively. What is that saying?
Yeah, so the rapid intensification, we in the last few years, I mean, it's just been scary how many storms have undergone this rapid intensification process. And I mean, you know, 4 landfalls for us last year, you know, 2 major hurricanes last year, and then get hit again this year. But even beyond that, you throw in Hurricane Michael and Harvey and all the rains that produced. I mean, there's something unusual going on right now. The big question is, are we just in a very odd period, or is climate change playing some role, or is it some combination of both? There's most likely some combination of both of those. What we're asking ourselves in the scientific community is this just because we have better surveillance of the storms, and that's something we're still trying to better understand. You know, what does our understanding of storms now mean to you know, how we were monitoring storms in the past? Right. And what we obviously were getting rapid intensification in the past as well, but are we getting more of it now? We probably are right now. We certainly are seeing some odd things taking place, you know, with this rash of major hurricane activity. Big question is, what does this mean in the bigger picture? I mean, there was a period from the mid-1920s to the mid-1960s where, you know, a lot of our coast, especially South Florida, just getting hammered with storms, and some of those probably did undergo some of these same kinds of processes.
For Louisiana, Audrey in 1957 and Betsy in 1965 punctuated this era. Camille left a huge mark on Mississippi in 1969. And what about plain old afternoon rainstorms that we've always had? They sure seem different now. Afternoon rainstorms that produce rain quicker, faster, harder than previous amounts. Is that saying anything about the current climate situation?
All of that is true. Yeah, what we're finding is storms are getting shorter in duration and more intense. And we're not necessarily getting more rainfall total at the end of the year, but the rains, you know, the way it's being distributed over the year is changing, and it's definitely coming down in bigger bursts. And that is consistent with what we'd expect in a global climate change scenario, where the atmosphere can just store and carry more moisture. And when you get the right mechanism to tap that moisture, you can squeeze it out and wring it out and put it on the ground a lot more quickly. The amount of flash flooding that we've experienced just this year, I mean, the May event's a great example. There was over 17 inches produced in just a few hours over in Lake Charles, and a lot of the area had 15 inches. And in that same event, we've had some, you know, pretty massive flooding over here in Baton Rouge, and then we've had subsequent events that have created quite a bit of flooding across this area. So flash flooding has become a big problem. It's a daunting future. I mean, and not only do we have, you know, the impacts of climate change playing itself out, and we're likely seeing some of that with you know, with the hurricane frequencies, the major hurricane frequencies that we've been seeing, the amount of rainfall is being produced not only by hurricanes but by other systems. And then we compound that with all this increased urban development in places that are even more vulnerable than where we've ever, you know, done urbanization in the past. So that combination is really leading to some massive problems across the state of Louisiana and really all over the country.
COVID cases are on the decline, but the drop isn't enough for some funeral directors. The number of deaths is starting to overwhelm the industry. Cynthia Miller, a director from Miller & Daughter Mortuary, says her workload has doubled since the Delta surge. She's part of a growing number of directors saying that this trend is not sustainable.
Louisiana funeral director Cynthia Miller is overwhelmed by the number of COVID cases. For Miller & Daughter Mortuary, each case is personal, and they've nearly doubled since July.
In the spring, we were very busy. We seem to be much more busier this season. I can tell you from the end of July to August, we probably did 60 to 65 cases.
60 to 65 people in a month may not seem like a lot of work, but her business isn't built to handle more than 20 deaths in a month. Pre-pandemic, the Miller & Daughter Mortuary only averaged 5 funerals per week. In spring 2020, numbers jumped to about 10 funerals per week. And now, her funeral home is picking up as many as 5 bodies a day. She says the pandemic is a direct link because nearly 75% of the deaths are unvaccinated COVID cases.
These deaths are preventable, which is the real difference. At least that's what feels like the difference. I out of all of these funerals we've had, I've had one person that was vaccinated. Okay. All of the others that died of not the vaccine or complications from the vaccine were not vaccinated. Okay. So it hurts my heart because family members are left devastated. And it just, in my mind, it just seems like it's unnecessary because perhaps the vaccination could have, the outcome would have been different.
Miller isn't the only one struggling under the weight of COVID. In Vernon Parish, the Lobby Memorial Funeral Home is also seeing deaths surge. The owner, Robert Laurent, says he saw an increase in 2020 just like Miller did. He says numbers increased by 25%, totaling 400 funerals for the year. In 2019, he'd have only seen around 250.
We weren't prepared, we weren't prepared for that influx of that many. A normal month for us is 18, 20 calls. And in the last year now, our average is probably 28 calls.
In July, as Delta variant cases increased, Lobby Memorial saw another jump. Lawrence says he'll likely surpass 2020's numbers. He's already at 325 deaths. Now keep in mind, we still have 3 months left of 2021, and the Louisiana Department of Health warns we could see another surge in October.
Population is not that many people other than in Vernon Parish where the Leesville location is. Fort Polk, we're used to having more people than what the population outside of the military base is, but our general population, we are accustomed to doing, 18 services a month, possibly. Our facility is not capable of dealing with, 40 a month. So we're being very conscious and trying to be careful about what we do. Every employee that works for me has just had to step up and sometimes work 16, 18 hours a day.
Like Miller, Laurent only has a small group of employees. When they get overwhelmed with the number of people coming in, sometimes it takes longer to prep the bodies for burial, which creates a backlog. He says this pace isn't sustainable without more employees.
Louisiana law requires that certain people can only do certain things. And so, we have enough licensed employees to cover our normal, what I would say, 250 funerals a year, services a year. And then you add another 25% on top of that. Well, that throws the licensed people into doing more things, the unlicensed people doing what they can to help. But yeah, physically and mentally, it's taxing on us.
Cases are still extremely high in Louisiana, peaking around September 1st of this year, but numbers are declining slowly. We're now averaging 58 deaths per week, which is slightly less than August, when the highest 7-day average was 63. Miller says she's seen a small drop in funerals, but her mortuary is still overwhelmed. She says there's only one way to fix that, and it's getting more people vaccinated.
The thing that I would like to say, if you're not going to get vaccinated, and of course that's your choice, at the very least, stay inside as much as possible. Wear your mask. It's real. This virus is real.
Miller says that 5 bodies a day is her limit. If cases build past that, she'll need to hire more employees to keep up with the demand.
For as long as Ed Orgeron is LSU's head coach, they will not win anything of significance again.
You just heard from Matt Moscona. He is a sports talk radio guru in the Baton Rouge area with a syndicated talk show, After Further Review, that airs a bunch of places. After the sex scandal, after COVID, after hurricanes, LSU fans were ready for something exciting to look forward to this fall with a football team. They were just a 1 year removed from a national championship. Last year's 5-5 team, considered an aberration. But then they played UCLA. They were favored. And Matt, I bring you in here today to talk about the LSU football season that feels stranger than any I've ever experienced. And it seemed to happen in that UCLA game that there was just a turn of feeling, lack of confidence suddenly, where it went in with confidence.
I think 2020 was either going to be the outlier or 2019 was going to be the outlier. And this season really was going to prove which one was which. And I think everyone who was sitting in the Rose Bowl that day, and I was there, kind of by the third quarter and certainly by the start of the fourth quarter, realized maybe 2019 was the outlier. Maybe 2020 is more of the norm of what we're going to expect from this LSU program. I think that's the feeling you sort of adequately described that a lot of people started to feel as that game played out.
And the tweets exploded after the game. There were people disgruntled. 20,000 people went out there. And so things really lit up in a way that they hadn't before. And immediately, Coach O was on the hot seat.
Yeah, I would tell you that I think the closest comp would be 2016. At the end of 2015, Joe Oliva was trying to fire Les Miles. He ended up keeping his job. And right when they lost to Wisconsin, opened the 2016 season, there felt like an inevitability that was going to be it. I think fans are kind of in that same spot now. You have an athletic director that very likely, any athletic director wants to hire their own coach. That's a legacy hire at a place like LSU when you hire a football coach. So Scott Woodward, no doubt at some point, is going to want to hire his own coach. There's so many off-the-field antics that you alluded to. And when you couple all of that with an inadequate performance on the field, that mountain of evidence against a coach starts to build, and that pressure is sometimes too much to overcome.
What you like to call Coach O the CEO of a $100 million corporation, which is LSU football, and that's what he was sort of branded when he came here. He would delegate, and he would sort of recruit and run things in that fashion. What kind of job has he done? Let's say since the national championship season.
Well, I think you could. 2019 is really like a sandwich, right? His career is a sandwich with 2019 in the middle, and that's kind of the outlier because if you're the CEO and you're expected to manage people and make good hires, well, you look at Bo Pelini was a bad hire. Scott Linehan was a bad hire. Right now, it certainly looks like the two new coordinators that he hired aren't panning out so far. If you know you're coaching for your job and you hire two coordinators that have never done that job before, that doesn't show great forethought there. Les Miles was in a similar situation after 2008, and he brought in John Chavis, who at the time was a very proven SEC defensive coordinator. All of that, then you couple with it the racial injustice protests of a year ago. I think Ed Orgeron mismanaged that with his roster. It's been one thing upon another, and then you have a lot of just negative PR from.
And the coach himself, his personal life has sort of been on display since he got divorced from his wife. I think he was seen around L.A., as a matter of fact, the day before the game. Is his focus there? Does it seem not to be there?
I think that's a very fair question to ask.
Or maybe it was before the season.
The thing that I say, Ed Orgeron's a single man, and there is no judgment here. He's entitled to do as a single man whatever he wants to do as a single man. The problem that I had, that his bosses have, I think that LSU fans probably have,
is the social media part.
When your personal life starts to bleed into and reflect negatively upon the football program as a whole, that's when you really have an issue. And that's what's starting to happen. When you have the exact question you asked, Andre, when you see the results on the field, it is fair to ask, is this person solely focused on the reason that he's here, or are these antics negatively affecting his job?
And Title IX is the big thing we haven't really delved into yet. He was called to testify, didn't, but gave a statement. That was at a Senate hearing early in the summer. There's more expected with Title IX in the coming months.
It's far from over. The U.S. Department of Education is investigating LSU for their mishandling of Title IX. There are 2 active lawsuits. Ed Orgeron is a defendant in 2 different lawsuits. It is far from over, and that might be the thing that ultimately is the nail in Ed Orgeron's coffin at LSU.
Oh, quickly about the team. They played McNeese. Not impressive. They play they play Central Michigan.
Right? One of them.
Yes, this weekend. Then they go to Mississippi State, which, normally that's a W, but it doesn't really look like it. What do you see the season being? Most people before said 9-3, 10-2.
Yeah, I was a 9-3 guy, but I had them beating UCLA. I think they'd be hard-pressed to get to 8-4. They have enough talent to where they're going to win games, Andre, but it's probably not going to be enough for Ed Orgeron. They're probably a 6-6 or 7-5 team.
That would be a big, big disappointment.
It would be a massive disappointment, and if that's the case, LSU would be hiring a new coach.
All right. You're on 104.5 in Baton Rouge, but syndicated a bunch of places, and you're on a bunch of other things, too.
Man,
I can't even name all the things you're on.
I always say, if you can spell my name, you can find me. Good luck with the vowels.
All right. Matt, thanks so much for being here.
My
we
pleasure.
Appreciate it. This coming Tuesday, September 21st, LPB is teaming up with mental experts from across the state for a virtual event. We would love for you to join us. The focus is the challenges of high school and college students, what they're facing since the start of COVID, which for us includes a number of hurricanes. The Wellbeings Tour is September 21st from 6 to 7:30. And for more information on this, you can go to wellbeings.org/LPB. And everyone, that is our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB app.
You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Moreau.
And I'm Kara St. Cyr.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.